Can you hear me all? I'm actually going to read my introduction because I want to make sure that Dr. Van Brunt gets an introduction that he deserves. Good morning, inspiring colleagues. So happy to be here with you today, and we're so happy that we have the opportunity to bring Dr. Brian Van Brunt here today. He has worked in the counseling field for more than 20 years, and he specializes in educational counseling and behavioral intervention and support. And he also focuses on issues related to mental health, substance and alcohol abuse by students. So Nicole and I had the opportunity to meet him at a conference and have been talking for about a year about how much we wanted to bring him here and have our colleagues learn from him too. So we're excited to have him here. He has also served as the Director of Counseling at the New England College of Western Kentucky, New England College and Western Kentucky University. He joined NSURM in January of 2013, and he is also the president of the National Behavioral Intervention Team Association. Dr. Van Brunt is a prolific writer also, and has authored numerous books and articles. He, in addition, has done many various assessment tools, created them, and created various video trainings. In his free time, he likes to do photography, and he is also a blogger. So we're really lucky to have him here today. Excited. Welcome, Dr. Van Brunt.
Well, good morning, everyone. I have to say that's exactly where I need you to be. I hope this person's not in the audience right now, but if you know them, right? They're like, good morning. I'm not that guy. So your response right there, first thing in the morning, beautiful, because that's what I need. Like what's up? Hey, like, that's perfect, right? I'll be the energy when we start, and we'll all get chatting as we go. So I love that. Thank you. The one person's like, I said good morning. You're like, it's too loud. It's just too loud. Thank you for having me out. I love coming to California to come out and talk about these different issues. I wish California and my booking agent got together because they don't always realize that right here is not very close to San Diego where I'm supposed to be tomorrow. Are you aware of that? You guys, y'all know this, but they're like, you're in California, so why don't you just go down there? And I'm like, it's a big place, you know, like the East Coast, like that's California. Like I have a map that I show them. So I'm really lucky in my career to have been in a position where I get to go out and talk about these issues to faculty. Just a little bit about myself. I've been a teacher, professor for about 25 years now, teaching at about 6 or 7 different schools, online as well as face-to-face, undergrad, first-year experience classes, all the way up to really complicated like terrorism prevention doctoral courses. So lots of different teaching experience. I was also a student in a blended program, so I got to be that student who's also taking some distance courses as well. So it's been a cool ride for me. In addition to that stuff, I also was the director of counseling at a couple different schools, one in Henniker, New Hampshire, and the other in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So just really nice to be able to, I think, kind of approach this issue for faculty in a way that touches both the student affairs place at the house, but also faculty as well. So today, go through a bunch of slides, talk about some of these issues, get a good discussion going, and we have about 90 minutes. We started a little late, but they assured me that none of you were like rushing off to another session right at 10:30, so kind of see how we get to the end. If you are, that's fine. I'm not going to be personally like harmed by this if you have to go. Usually people are reluctantly like, geez, this is good though, I want to. I'm just saying based on my experience, so you might want to cancel your 10:30. They're also recording this, which will be nice. So if the faculty member who you think needs this most, who's not here today, you can send them that link and be like, hey, just want to faculty joke too early in the morning. That's fine. That'll be up there for you as well. Just a little logistics related to that. If you do have a question, absolutely jump in with it. I would, this is going to sound super stereotypical of faculty. If you could phrase the question shortly so that I can repeat it back for the camera, because they were like, we have a microphone. I'm like, that's like the nightmare scenario, because then you're dealing with the passing of the microphone and people who are like microphone phobic were like, I had a question, but I'm not going to ask it if I have to use the mic. So just ask your question, but try not to make it a rambling, 3-minute diatribe on like, well, in the Western civilization, in the history. Don't start there. Or if you're going to do that, like make the question just more direct at the beginning, so I can repeat it. Then you can go off on that. So that's it. There should be a site for you. I think you were all emailed, hopefully, a companion guide. I'm glad they chose not to print that out. We struggle a lot with the slide sets that we develop for each school, doing different sessions, having good handouts for them. So what we've really fallen upon is this visual way of presenting, and then giving just a huge course pack with it. So there's more information in there than we're going to cover today. It's 80 pages. I suggest maybe don't print it out, but if there's little sections in there that could be useful, there's some case studies, some good information, good stuff in there to look at as you're moving forward. Sound good? Cool. Yes. Absolutely. So there's 2 books that I've been involved in writing. The first is a faculty guide, and the publisher said, hey, that sold really well. Can we do a staff guide? And I was like, yeah, maybe we could just like cut and paste where it says faculty and put staff in, and we'll be good. And then sadly, Amy and I got working on it. We just ended up rewriting the whole book for staff. So the concepts are very similar. I tend to teach out of the psychology field a bit. Some of the concepts maybe you've heard about in grad school. But I find that they're useful to kind of be reminded of as we get into this position working with the students that we're charged to help. So if you've ever written a book, you don't get rich off writing books. Everyone's like, oh, Brian's pushing his books. I literally like have gotten like $5 from writing these books, but they're great. Yay, authors, very great. But if you're someone who learns more through reading, that's a different way to look at this and can be really useful as well. I think there's a couple copies that they've purchased that might be available for lending too. You can just go to Amazon and they're both on there. That's me. It's from New Orleans, originally from Jersey. So if there's any Jersey people in the room, we'll meet up at, what exit, where were you about? Got to check in with my Jersey people. Where were you on the exit land? South, 105, Asbury Park, Bruce kind of country. You're Cowland, so I like that. That's good. So always Jersey people find each other. My email's up there. You can certainly email me. Some good information on the website. And I have some cards up here if you need them. And I'm assuming there'll be a lot of this up on the site as well if you need me. So as we talk about violence prevention and all the different ways that we discuss, I do work for a law firm. If you know lawyers, they like slapping warning labels on everything. So here's your warning label. I do think this stuff works. It's evidence-based. It's research-based. These are great concepts that I think will help you as you move forward. But I do always like to do a little bit of a trigger warning. Higher ed's weird with trigger warnings, right? Because they're like, oh, these unique little special snowflakes can't handle anything anymore, and now I can't teach this. A trigger warning is not about what you can and can't teach. It's giving your audience a heads up that you might watch something that's disturbing to them. That's actually, to me, about manners and respect. So just to take this narrative back a little bit, that a trigger warning or a content warning means that the students can't handle things. What it means is you're giving them a heads up about the material. It's a bit controversial, not to skip the material. That's censorship. That's a different problem. Do any of you have like your young kids, you bring them to see like Deadpool? Was that? No. That's not a good parenting decision. I'm just going to go across the board. Probably at 18, you're still going to have to answer a lot of questions that you didn't expect. So that's the movie rating system, right? We know what a rated R movie is. We know what on the TVMA. So it's a heads up for us about these issues. Again, Game of Thrones for like a 4-year-old, maybe, again, not great things to watch. So we give the audience a heads up about the material. So it's a different way of looking at this. I found some warning signs that I liked. These are cool. Your dog does a poo, please put it in the litter bin. I like that delay. You're like, oh, you're processing, your coffee's getting up to speed, that's good. They tried this with a bigger dog, that didn't work out as well. I don't know if I would have tried that with a German Shepherd, but all right, you do you. I got stuck on dog warning signs for a while on the internet. I don't know who this dog is or why he's banned from this park, but he certainly seems like a lot of fun. It's good. I should warn you, my humor is aimed at like 5 of you. It'll be a different 5 throughout the time. So like 5 of you are like, that's really funny. The other one's like, I don't know what that. That's fine. Just go with it. You'll be okay. This is for my folks who've been on the planet a little longer than I have. This is good. You're a little bit in horse country right here. I feel like this is probably one you can get. If you're a millennial, just YouTube this, like Roy Rock. Nah. If you are a millennial, you want to look at this just before, if the building suddenly bursts into flame, just a quick heads up that you might want to leave before posting that on social media. I would say Facebook, but I have 4 kids, 3 of which are teenagers now, and they say they don't use Facebook, so I'm very aware. So my 16-year-old's very excited that I'm aware of TikTok. That's been very enjoyable for me. If you don't know what TikTok is, please take a look at it because it's just fascinating insight. It's like the Star Trek episode where you kind of land on a different planet and you're like the anthropologist, like kind of looking around at like what's going on. Just go to TikTok for a little while and it's like, what is going on with our youth? I don't even know. So as I mentioned, I moved away from this old way of presenting. I just find this one a lot better for numerous reasons. You've been to presentations before where we get the slide handouts and they're reading off the screen and stuff. Just not what we do anymore. So hopefully this will be a little more enjoyable for you. That course pack, for those of you who are prone to organization, and who I'm talking to right now would be people in the room, my little litmus test for you. If I was like, I need to draw a straight line, does anyone have like a ruler? If you currently have a ruler on you right now, I'm talking directly to you. If I ask you for a highlighter and you're like, what color? I got like 3. Again, talking to you, and for sure you're the president of this club. If I needed a little stapler. If you had like a little staple, you know, the ones that take like the little staples, not the big staples. So if you're super organized, that companion pack has everything we're talking about here. And I would encourage you to be in touch over email. If you have questions about anything, happy to share. If there's a video that you like that we watch, let me know. But I do like this to be able to be shared with other folks in the, a lot of the stuff I do is like train the trainer. This might be useful for your students as well in different classes that you teach. So I do want to try to get away from the information overload. I can give you great information, but if it's not landing well, that's going to be an issue, which by the way is a bit of a parallel process for this entire talk. So one of the challenges with classroom management is keeping the students interested, because when they're interested, they're not misbehaving as much. They're focused on the content, on the passionate delivery of material, the creating of a learning environment. That's really what we're shooting for. And really that gets out in front of almost all of the classroom management problems that I've seen. If they're engaged and interested in the material and respect the person delivering it, you're in a much better place. So that whole getting their attention becomes important so they don't have a heart attack. So I don't know for you what your personal monster student is, but we all have one, don't we? This could be a student who asks off-topic questions while you're trying to lecture about a difficult particular topic. This could be a student who's entitled, the student who mentions the E word. You know the E word, right? I didn't really do anything this entire semester, but is there a way I could use some extra credit right now to get to the, so I'm getting a little closer to your resident point, right? The student who's demanding, argumentative, or even the ones who are overly dependent on every single thing. Like maybe you should think about that yourself and come up with a thought that's yours and not just out of the textbook, right? So we all have that student that challenges us. So I don't know what that one is for you, but here's another representation of them. I like this. They're roller skates, banana, scissors, knife. You just kind of know where they're headed. At the core of the talk today is really this idea of looking at both disruptive and dangerous behavior. And where are my math people, math professors? I go, oh, you're like all together at one table. I love it. Good close-knit group. Awesome. I tapped out around linear algebra and computer science. I was like, yeah, no, this is hard. I'm gonna. Then I was like, maybe I'll do psychology. So I just read stuff and talk about how I feel about it. That sounds great. I'm gonna do that because math was not my thing. Although then they brought statistics in to psych, and I'm like, what's this about? Like I thought, but jokes on me. Then I taught statistics, so that I came back full circle. Anyway, Venn diagrams, right, y'all? That was the whole point. So it's going to be an overlap here between the two. So we're never going to get this quite perfect tight ontology of like this is disruptive, this is dangerous. The question is where they switch over and they go back and forth, and that's some of your challenge. So as we talk, it's an elephant. As we talk about disruptive behaviors, what's the elephant about? Well, the elephant in the room that's here now is this idea that the students aren't here now. If you want to bring me back, I love talking to students, one of my favorite things. But the kind of messaging I would have for the students is different than the messaging I'll have for the faculty, slightly different than the messaging I might have for the staff. So we could have our kumbaya moment where we just teach nothing today, sit around and tell our war stories about the students we hate the most, the ones that have challenged us the most, these outlier stories. And that's fun. And we all have like a little fist bump and hug it out, and it's great. The problem is we're still stuck, right? There's no shift that occurs for us. So what we're trying to do here is find a way to acknowledge that the students that are coming to us have certain challenges, whether they're non-traditional students, which is like code word for older, whether they're students who are coming back from like active service or veteran status, students who are put in difficult positions with socioeconomic challenges, family difficulties, seeing a lot of nodding. So these are the students that you're working with, or even traditionally aged students who are coming in who just aren't as prepared. They did well in high school, maybe they're not quite ready for college yet. They were the big fish in the small pond, and now they're here, and they're like, but I was valedictorian. But here, where we have different standards, maybe not as much. So helping the students where they're at and all these challenges becomes critical. So the elephant in the room is the students aren't here. I would talk to them differently. What I want to do with you is try to move past this moment of like, these students are the problem. We can kind of leave that for another session. The issue here, though, is like, given that these are our students, what do we do with them to do better, to be more effective in our teaching styles? So what I want to do is kind of fill your toolkit with some ideas of ways after, like right after this session, that you can go and work with your students with some new ideas and to try to build connection and community. And also have a bit of a dialogue about that. That's where I'm headed. That's cool. Even if it's not cool, that's still where I'm headed. So I have a list, and it's always the requirement to have a list, right, of some disruptive behaviors. I'd like to ask you which of these resonate with you? Are there ones we missed on this list? What would you add to it? What have you seen? Or are there ones you're like, this is my top one I see all the time? Or you're like, this is a really good list, Brian. You got them all. So a lot of your instructors, you might forget this idea. If you all talk at once, it's going to be hard for me to break through and discern who's saying what. So just one at a time with this. Just too much with everybody. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So the impassive student who looks like they care less. And this is an interesting point, right? Because the impassive student or the one who's just disengaged or not paying attention, this could be 10 different things, right? We could have someone experiencing severe depression, PTSD, they just got divorced from their wife. So the idea here, or they could just be lazy and just don't want to be in class, right? So the challenge, I think, for a lot of us when we're dealing with disruptive behaviors is starting with understanding where that behavior is coming from. Because the intervention techniques for someone who's depressed and barely functioning is slightly different than the intervention techniques for someone who's lazy, for lack of a better word, or not invested in the particular class. Like there's different challenges. One's a referral, hopefully, and a deeper conversation. The other's going to be trying to find a hook for them to get them connected to the course material. And that sometimes comes back to the professor, making the lecture, the information interesting and engaging, which I think also helps with that too. Others stand out for you? Let's go here and then there. Yeah, please. Yeah. Sure. We found your monster, didn't we? Yeah, chronically late students who come in. Yeah, absolutely. I had a student who did kind of it's in your ballpark. It was a big class, like 70 students. It was right after lunch, so thanks for that, Dean. And the class was, would get going. And there's this one woman who would sit all the way in the back in the middle and would like clockwork. And I'm not sure what this was about, like a smoke break, or she had some like irritable bowel syndrome. I'm not sure. But she had to go to the bathroom like 15 minutes into the class. She also dressed in a way that, shall we say, was slightly provocative. So, and this was the problem I was having. She would stand up and walk in front of everybody and then go and disappear for 10 minutes and walk back. And it was super disruptive. But it was also something that, was difficult to address. So we talked and tried to get her maybe sitting a little closer to the door, or, something that would really cause, if you need to leave frequently, is there a way to try to reduce some of that impact? So these are some of the challenges that we run into with students: the chronic lateness, inappropriate things from like speech on their t-shirt sometimes, like "fuck you, you fucking fuck," but it was being recorded. Sorry. It is California though, so I feel a little safer. That doesn't fly as well in like Missouri, so I feel a little safer with this, but plus the northern. Yeah, I said nothing. I see. Was there one other one over here that resonated with y'all? Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, like how you doing? Like a little Joey from Friends, right? Like just little, yeah, good. I see I got like 5 of you on that one. Yeah, that boundary issues, right, in a larger context is important. I used to teach grad school, and I had some professors would have students over to their house. And there's ways, I think, in those scenarios to be careful, to create some harm reduction strategies. If you're having students to your house in a grad cohort, like, do you develop like a rule or a boundary, like maybe not upstairs, or are you thoughtful about if the student's in the bathroom, are they going through your medicine cabinet? Like, are there things that you do to have some harm reduction piece to it? But yeah, those boundary issues definitely come up. And part of good instructors who've been doing this for a while understand that forming a relationship with the students and having a connection to them actually is really helpful. But where those boundaries fall is challenging. And it's more challenging around the dating because different schools have different rules about that. So sometimes it's frowned upon, other times it's openly allowed, and other times it's a fireable offense. So depending on your HR person, that might be different here. I'm not going to get into which one that is here. I always think it's not a great idea, but the impact of that can be difficult too. So getting to boundaries for sure. Here's a video I pulled up. I think this was about
the same page on page 100, an example of negligent misrepresentation.
If I were a betting man, take like the over under on how nose going to touch the table, where do we?
Rented a space from a man-wise company
Somewhere.
that,
So close, right? So very close.
and in their contract.
The whole rest of the training, by the way, was just
square feet, was going to be rented, and it turns out that that's and it was actually more, so she was going to
If you look at what he wrote, does not care for it, you bring. I love that. That's another good one. Okay. So it's clearly disruptive in the idea that it's not dangerous, and it's disruptive for this student who's not learning. But like Scorsese over here, like setting up his shot, right? Like he's not learning anything, and the other students around him aren't learning it. So it has this like Bart Simpson effect, right? Like everyone around him. Skinner had that graphic once where it was like showed Bart on a seating chart, and like all the students around him had like lower grades. He called it the cone of ignorance, I believe, was the mathematical term of it. Sometimes we also deal, though, with dangerous behaviors where things cross over from simply difficult and challenging, and late students, for example, which are certainly frustrating, dealing with that, boundary issues, but then it moves into potential violence. So I'm guessing some of you have seen things like this as well. Examples here that resonate for you, or things that you would add that made you feel unsafe. The throwing of things. While you're thinking about this, I don't want to jump too quick to intervention, but one of the things I will share with you is please don't, for your students, let them off the hook of your conduct process. This is probably more for student affairs conduct folks, but it's like broken window theory. If we have a student who's behaving badly in class and violating the academic code of conduct, we need to hold them accountable to that, and I would argue formally. Now, if it's simply on their phone and not listening, I'm not really there yet, but if we're dealing with them throwing something, pushing away, having a loud rant, and then storming out of the room, these are things that need to go to the conduct office. And here's why. I get the consult call 3 months later when you all are ready to kick the student out of the program, and the conduct folks will call me and say, in the BIT, your CERT team here, we're ready to move to removing the student from campus, and everyone's excited about it. I say, what's your conduct process look like? They're like, well, we've talked to them several times informally. And that's not going to fly. Due process really informs our conduct process, as well as our Title IX process and our threat assessment process. So we need to give the student a chance to respond to these things. And by doing that in a formal way, we kind of put a line in the sand to let them know if this behavior continues, we need to set some expectations with them. So it doesn't work well as a one and done where they do something bad and we meet with them and we just kick them out. What works a lot better is when we have 4 or 5 moments where we've had conduct talk to a student about their behavior in class and then address that consistently over time. Eventually getting to a point where 4 or 5 of these moments is going to move towards a suspension or a more serious progressive conduct action. Here's the challenge though. Not only do we not want to skip the conduct process, we don't want to give students a get out of jail free card. And here's the two groups that we give this to the most: students with mental health conditions and veterans. And I love those two populations. I love working with those groups. That there's no question in my heart about working, loving these students, trying to help them achieve what they need to achieve. However, if you have a veteran student who's hitting things with a cane in class when they're angry, or threatening other people, we're not doing them any favors ignoring that behavior or tolerating it in the classroom. We want to make sure that the CERT team's aware of it and that the conduct team's aware of it. Because you might handle it very well as a faculty member, like you might de-escalate that just fine. But the problem is the next faculty member who gets it, who doesn't do that well, you end up in a difficult position. Same thing with the mental health conditions. When we start saying, we have a student, say, with like Asperger's or ASD, and they're engaging in off-topic questions, interrupting the class over and over again, and you set limits on them. What you never want to do is say, well, they have this mental health condition, it's just kind of who they are. This needs to go through your academic disability process, through your ADA process, to make sure there's a reasonable accommodation for these behaviors. So let me pause there, because this is kind of the first time I'm sharing some of my ideas about this. And while they're informed by best practice, I want to see if that's resonated with any of you, or you had questions about the use of the conduct process in that. Yeah, please. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. So, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The safe integral kind of process. So let me repeat this back for the camera so everyone can kind of hear this. She was saying how great this presentation was first thing in the morning, and quite frankly, how she was surprised. Like anytime you have a mandated training, you're like, oh, here we go again with this guy. But she was like, this is actually pretty good. So that was nice. Thank you. Yeah, awesome. What she was saying was this idea of the needs of the individual versus the needs of the community was part of this. Like, how do we help the individual student, but also the impact of their behavior to other students? And we also worry a bit, especially in BIT teamwork, threat assessment, and CERT work, these teams that are deployed to kind of keep an eye on at-risk students on campus. The idea here is how do we assess them? How is the team being transparent with you when you make a referral to the team about what happens next? We don't want this black hole scenario where you make a report and you just never hear from the team again. But one of the good things about the team is that they're really driven by FERPA. You've heard a lot about FERPA, right? In this aspect, FERPA, under legitimate educational interest, as well as the emergency exemption, if there's like a threat in class, gives the team and the student affairs group a little more leeway to talk to you about what the next actions are, and that actually should be investing in you as kind of eyes and ears on the ground, so that the next time something happens, that we progressively move up that conduct chain. So most teams that we train are very well trained on things like what factors to look for targeted violence. There's an entire, there's a slide in here I'll show you about that. So I think when faculty see this and they understand that there's a process in place and it's very much evidence-based and informed, that helps, I think, take some of the temperature down and then see them as a bit of a parallel with us. It's never a perfect process, but it's certainly one that works. Yeah, but you're left with that. Yeah, no, for sure. And you're left with this tension that has nothing to do with your report or the team's response. You're left with the tension of the needs of the individual versus the needs of the community, and that's the conflict that will never be 100% on. Great thought, great question. I want to show the second video here to talk about a dangerous behavior. I go back and forth with this one. It was around the Trayvon Martin shooting in Florida, if you recall that. So it has an African-American female acting out of control. And one of the things in our society is this idea of seeing African-American women as like more emotional and not like in their right mind when they get upset. So I don't want to feed into that, but I do think it's an excellent short example of someone in a classroom getting upset and kind of moving up that arc what we call effective violence. I want to show this, but I always like to mention that first. I have other examples of white people getting very upset as well, but I just don't want to feed into that context just from a microaggression standpoint. Before I show it, one other comment, the language is harsh. I do fear that because your sound system is HDMI, it's going to be really loud. I don't have a sound control on this, and I think the sound guy is gone, so I don't see a switch. So hopefully it won't be too loud. We'll see how it goes. She does say over and over again, the rest of the class says, do it, do it, do it. What they're saying is someone said, we're going to call 911. And she's basically saying, go ahead and do it, call 911. There's a lot there, right? First off, I always like to point out the best classroom management technique is not like all that shit going on. I guess I'm going to go back to teaching here. So right. So I think some of you caught that, like the more experienced professors, and you understand why, right? In the heat of the moment, we get into these survival arcs, the fight, flight, freeze. We talk about this with active shooter drills a lot, like getting people out of that headspace of taking action. And sometimes when we're scared and worried, we drop back into what we know, which is there's slides. Point 3. Let's go to point 3, right? She's like picking up a trash can to throw it like WrestleMania style, and he's like on bullet point 3. If you're to watch it again, I usually show it without the sound, but I'm too loud to show again. One of the things that you're going to see, though, is you watch this and she gets up upset, right? And then she's ignored. At the point where he goes back to teaching is actually where she starts swinging the chair, clenches her fist, and then she comes up out of the chair. So what you have here is someone who's upset verbally, who begins to gesture physically, who comes up and then begins to challenge other people, right? She walks up to that one student. The student doesn't make eye contact with her, which de-escalates a little bit, and then she starts wandering again. She does what we call target planting. She picks up a piece of paper, crumbles it, and throws it. If that had been a laptop, a stapler, she would have thrown whatever happened to be there. So we see this kind of arc. Now this doesn't give you a lot of, this is pretty far along the stage to try to de-escalate this. I think even I would have some trouble with calming this student down. As I mentioned, it was around a Trayvon Martin discussion in class, around the shooting that had occurred. The professor is making, I believe, some type of biological arguments about fright and state, like he's trying to make an academic point. And clearly her politics and feelings about this were still so raw, as in some ways they should have been. She got reactive, and then this just went back and forth. But so you've been in those scenarios before. This escalates further. She's actually, several students try to calm her down in the hallway. She ends up being tased, and it moves to a hospitalization. So a lot of stuff in this video. My hope is that, I like to show this too, because it maybe reminds you that maybe it's not as bad as it could be in your classroom. Although there's usually one person who's like, that happened last week. That's so weird. So sorry. But you see the difference between some of the disruptive and dangerous behaviors. That's really part of what we're trying to understand. The dangerous part, we're always going to want to make a referral back to the CERT team, to the police, or the counseling office. With the disruptive ones as well, if they're repetitive or more severe, we also want to make those referrals up, but also manage that situation. So for the rest of the time today, we'll talk a little bit more about management techniques right after we talk about the 2 different kinds of violence you should be aware of. Questions before we jump forward? Cool. A lot of the work that we do, I would argue, related to classroom management is about prevention, about getting out in front of the problem. And many of you know this, if you've taught for a while, you understand that first class is an opportunity to form a community and get connected with your students. And this is not contingent on the content. So there's that kind of math joke earlier that in the psychology classes, we have a little more leeway in sociology to kind of talk about things, and that with math, you got math stuff to do, right? So the challenge, I think, here is even in a context where there's a lot of like material and things that you're going through, taking a little time preventatively to get out in front and form a community can actually pay dividends down the line. I'm a big fan of taking that first class and just getting to know your students. If you only meet once a week for 3 hours, that's not going to work. You've lost, what, like a tenth of your class time or something. So take the first hour of that before a break. But get to know them. You know, do a game, talk about why they're taking the class, what they're hoping to get out of it, what their favorite pet looks like. Even if you're teaching online, which I do at the University of Toledo now with grad students, I let them know. I do a little video intro. I talk about the places I've traveled. We have some kind of connection as we're moving forward. You don't want to be that teacher in 4th grade, right? And it's usually a math teacher, sorry, folks. But they're like, you know, it's the first day back from school. You're super excited. You got your trapper keeper out. You're ready to go. And like the teacher's like, so we're going to just go ahead and jump back into long division and go back over that. We finished that up in the summer, and now we're going to, you're like, but it's the first day of class. Like, I got my trapper keep, the zipper I'm working on, like pencils are still getting sharpened. Like, you just get to know each other today, right? It's the first day of school. Like, take it easy. So you can be having great content, but if you're not reading the room and getting connected to why people are in your class and forming that community, if you will, I think your classes are going to not go as well. So I know that can sometimes feel like a waste of time, valuable content time. But I recall back in my graduate student days, there's this brilliant psychologist who was teaching psychopharmacology, which was a particularly boring topic to me. He was the smartest person I've ever met in that area, and he would always keep us 10 minutes later than the class time, and it was a night class. No one liked him, right, because of that. And we actually didn't learn the material as much because we were so frustrated. He was super smart, but he wasn't reading the room. And that's some of the challenge there. You can have the right answer and the right material, but if you don't take the time to get to know your students and understand where they're coming from, I like to describe this as putting money in the bank, so that when you have a difficulty down the line, when they have a moment where they're not turning in their assignments, or you need to confront them about a behavior, there's a relationship there. Right? We're getting past that objectification. I'm the professor, you're the student. We get to the, I'm Brian, and you're not Brian, or maybe you're Brian too. Make sense? Yeah. Questions on that, or that kind of resonate with you? 2 types of violence I'll just cover real quick here for you. There's effective violence and then predatory violence, and these are different. And that's important to understand. I do a lot of work on threat assessment training, doing, you know, the cases that you see that escalate to a point where the police are involved are usually the ones that I'm teaching on. I teach an advanced threat course. I'm doing this work with law enforcement in different groups. This is one of the set of slides that I always work in. It's so important for you all to know this as well, just the difference in the violence that occurs. Effective violence here is really going to be violence that's driven by emotions. It's driven by the situation and environment. They're reactive to something. This is the just snapping violence that you have. So someone who's kind of maintaining, and they just have one day where they just kind of lose it. They're upset about a grade. They're frustrated about a course assignment. They're upset about financial aid. When we talk to staff, we do similar discussions about these. But they're reacting to a stressful situation. This violence is poorly planned. Also relates to like drunken violence. If you've ever been somewhere where people get drunk or intoxicated, occasionally this happens on Bourbon Street, especially with the LSU Clemson game that just finished this weekend. That was fun to watch. Not the game, Bourbon Street. After the game was fun to watch. That is the kind of violence that often is reactive to a situation. We have the emotional loss for the Clemson fans, and then we had the celebratory nature of the LSU fans, and then from there, you know, things kind of escalated a bit. My friends, by the way, would find it hilarious that I'm using a sports ball example because I know exactly nothing about sports. It seems like I should. That fact that I just pulled off that little talk is amazing. I spend most of the time yelling, "Go Tigers," just to frustrate people. I threw in like a Roll Tide once in a while because I have like some knowledge enough to mess with people that those are not the right things to say. But that's emotional fight, flight, freeze. So when I think about this violence, what I think about most here, and I think this is a really great visual example, is the Hulk. Now, for some of you, right, I went old school Lou Ferrigno on this one, right? So you appreciate that. Others of you are like, why is this guy painted green? And is that like a water buffalo he has above his head? What's going on there? I'm not sure. That's the Hulk, right, to a T. They're reactive. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. Don't get me angry. And he's throwing cars and big water buffaloes. The Hulk went new digital, so I just felt for my younger audience, I wanted to be supportive. Although it gets weird with the Avengers. I don't know what to do with that. I'm just not quite sure. That's not helping. I want to show you this video as well, because what it does really nice is highlight this emotionally driven violence. And It's important because the other kind of violence is the violence that's associated with mass attacks. So if you are concerned about school shootings, as all of us are, one of the things to take away from this is that if we're dealing more with effective violence, it's difficult, it's challenging, but it doesn't arc in the same way towards these larger attacks. So things like incel, the involuntarily celibates, the white supremacist groups, all the things that we're tracking right now, trying to address and that's coming into the classroom, those are much more about this predatory or targeted violence I'll talk about in a moment. But for this, we're dealing with this emotional reactive point as it occurs. I have to say, the cat in this video is fine. So if you're a cat lover, even if you don't like cats, either way, the cat is fine. I have 6 cats. I know that's too many cats. I didn't start out with 6 cats. I have 4 kids, and there's that whole brother-sister cat rescue thing that happened that they like suckered me in on. Some of you relate to this. I love cats. I'd never show you a picture or a video of a cat getting hurt. You're gonna have to trust me on this one because the cat's on a leash and the cat's like freaking out. The cat's not really the one that you want to worry about because the cat is under the camera, is on a leash. Cats don't like leashes. They're frustrated, they're overwhelmed, the cat's not doing well, and they're trying to be calm, but the cat's seeing this as an escalation. It's a great demonstration of effective violence. Again, the cat's fine. The cat is not the one in the video you should be worried about.
Pinky. Hi, this is Pinky. He's a
Start again. Hold on. For Carl Pritchard, the best thing about being an animal control officer is finding a good home for a homeless pet.
Go. This is Pinky. He's a male. He's available for adoption. He's pet of the week, Placer County Animal Shelter.
Carl does his best to make Pinky feel comfortable in front of the camera.
He's a very loving cat.
But Pinky has stage fright.
Pinky.
Pinky, whoa. Whoa.
Pinky. Settle down, bud. You got a wildcat on there. Pinky.
Pritchard has faced ferocious pit bulls and Rottweilers in his day. But this day, he's met his match. An 8-pound domestic shorthair.
Pinky.
Pinky's a scrapper who won't go down without a fight. The passionate jungle instincts kick in him as Pinky tries to break free. Pritchard tries to control the animal. A tough job that's about to get worse. Pinky's had enough, and so has Officer Pritchard. This 8-pound cat practically brought a 250-pound man to his knees. Maybe Pritchard should transfer to a safer job, like the bomb squad.
So it's what I'll call the pinky violence, if you will. But you've seen this from students before. It's reactive, they're frustrated, and we'll spend a lot of time today talking a little bit about how to address that. I want to put some tools in your toolkit as we're moving forward. The understanding, though, between these differences is so critical because this violence, while it's disruptive and annoying and frustrating and difficult and involves the conduct process, sometimes police, the violence that we want to worry about is really the predatory violence. And this is so important to make sure that we're reporting things forward when we see these. This involves detailed planning. So when a person gets upset, instead of becoming reactive emotionally, they percolate, they hold on to things to keep it inside. It's strategic and tactical, so they're actually thoughtful about what they're going to do. If you've watched the movie Office Space with Milton and the red swing line stapler, it's a funny example throughout the entire movie of effective and predatory violence. Throughout the movie, he's put upon, they keep moving him, they take away his radio and his stapler. He just wants to listen to the news at a reasonable volume between 10 and 11:30. So this escalates for him, and eventually, he every time they mess with him, he says, I'll do it, but I'm gonna burn the building down. And eventually, spoiler alert, he burns the building down. So it's a great example of this kind of effective violence. I always use media as examples, and I was a little hesitant, but then we had Russ Pollara, Dr. Pollara from NCIS, do a training, place on the TV show. And he actually used the Office Space as a clip to talk through effective violence. I was like fanboy in the audience. This is the best, I love it. The willingness to give up your life for a cause, suicidality being present here. This kind of violence is a little different in terms of its arc. And I was trying to think about what clip. I have a lot of clips I use in the threat course. This one's probably useful, but it's a little disturbing. I'll just give you a little heads up before I show it. Well, I'll make this point first. This is the violence of Troy. Now, if you're familiar with the myth, right? This is the soldiers were in the belly of the horse. They were rolled into Troy as a gift. They waited, and Ulysses and his men then came out and killed everyone in the night. Instead of the direct storming forward, they hold on to this. They have a tactical idea moving forward. The example I'll show you here is a little bit from the Columbine attack. This was footage taken at a shooting range prior to the attack about a month before, where they're out there practicing and thinking about these things. So what we're really looking for here are more subtle signs, people who are upset and frustrated, marginalized, put against, feeling hopeless, suicidal, helpless. These are all the factors that I would attend to. Here they are planning about a month before on how to carry out the attack.
But Eric and Dylan used the school's television production equipment again to produce a disturbing home video. This footage, recovered from Eric's home hours after the attack, helps answer the question, how did they learn to shoot with such accuracy? They practiced at a shooting range. March 1999. 1 month before their rampage, Eric and Dylan took a video camera to a makeshift firing range in the mountains just outside Denver. In the video, they can be seen honing their skills by firing at trees and bowling pins and marveling at the destruction they can cause.
Imagine that in someone's fucking brain.
So what highlights here for us, and forgive the disturbing nature of that clip, is what we see as fantasy rehearsal. Someone very interested in paying back the wrongs that have occurred for them. These are two folks who had a lot of bullying behavior that occurred both from them and to them, a lot of tension at the school. So there wasn't the same kind of effective violence from them that occurred, but this more subtle frustration, this growing anger at the people who had been mistreating them. That's really what we're looking for more in the classroom. So just in terms of the prevention piece, I wanted to make sure that you had that distinction. I don't need you to make that distinction all the time, but I guess the main takeaway here is the idea that you don't want to just, it's not just the screaming out of control, frustrated student that we want to hear about. And in a lot of ways, it's almost more important to hear about the student who is quietly in this place of frustration, suicidality, helplessness, hopelessness. I used to be an EMT for a little bit, doing that work kind of part-time on a volunteer squad. I remember what my EMT instructor said when we were learning about car accidents. He said, if you come up to a car accident, you have two people in the front seat, with the driver's screaming their head off and yelling, like, come get me, I'm dying. And the passenger's quiet, like, who do you go to first? And you all know that the quiet one, and here's why. What do we know about someone who's screaming in a traffic accident medically? They're alive, good, excellent, well done. They have their breathing, right? Their cognitions, their brain functions working. They have circulation if they're able to scream. They also have a pain response. Right? One of the first things the EMTs do is look for like a sternal rub, do a pain response, and they feel things. And you already know that because they're screaming at you, I'm dying, I'm in pain. So while that's difficult, they're not going to be the higher risk right there. The one who might be in shock, might be bleeding out, might be unconscious, that might be where you'd go first. So the parallel here, I think, in higher ed and in classroom management is also attending to the quiet ones, where they have this frustration that kind of builds over time. So before I jump into the what to do about it, which is where we're headed now, so I've established the problem well and some of my experience with it. Questions about any of that, anything I've shared so far before we jump into the solution and giving you some practical tools? Yeah, please. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, great, really great question. So the question was around suicidality and how that relates to something that we're talking about, really toying with the idea of, is it all suicidality we worry about? Or are there other things with the suicidality that we'd be concerned? Suicidality, hopelessness, and desperation are really the biggest factor I would look at related to targeted violence. So I want to be careful, though, to say that everyone who's suicidal isn't necessarily going to hurt other people. The problem is when we're suicidal, when we're willing to take our own life or feel forced into that position, the normal way we might think about things, the average things that we might do, change. If you ever saw the movie Falling Down, right? That's a good example of someone who kind of goes off the rails, and is the one with, who's it? Michael Douglas, yeah, where he kind of goes to McDonald's and he like wants a breakfast sandwich, and it's like 10:30. He's like, sorry, we're on lunch now. And he kind of flips out and takes out a gun. Like, it's a great movie in the history of someone who's lost scaffolding and sociological controls in their life. and now is just kind of operating on their own. So one of the worries about suicidal individuals is they're not restrained by the things that we might be. Like, why are you here right now? Why aren't you just home sleeping? Like, oh, that's a good question, Brian. I don't know. I hope you have a good answer, right? I would argue there's a lot of things that would constrain us, right? But if you were going to kill yourself, right, where you lost everything that was important to you, you lost your spouse, you don't have any money, you don't have a car, your kids aren't around, you're fired from your job, you can imagine in that depressing scenario, you might be willing to take more extreme action, the kind of things that would constrain your choices. Like, why don't I punch the barista at Starbucks when she doesn't make my latte the right way? Like, I would hope I wouldn't do that because that would be a dick thing to do. But also, I don't want to get arrested. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want my kids to look at me badly. I think there'd be a karma issue. So there's societal restraints that keep me there. If I'm going to die and I'm not going to be here anymore, I might move into these higher action behaviors more. When we do a threat assessment, one of the things we look at is suicidality. There's another 34 factors that we look at. And I can share some of those with you visually and certainly talk more with you about some of those either online or in some of the handout packs. But the idea here is that we look at the totality, so suicide along with, say, an injustice collecting or grievance collecting, along with a fixation and a focus on a particular target, along with an action and time imperative, a movement to when this might happen. That's how we would see a progressive aggravation in the threat assessment process. Really good question. So you knew I was a therapist. You knew this was coming at some point, asking you how you felt about things. So I think understanding how we feel when we're dealing with a crisis, and I would say most of the crises that you're going to deal with are going to be affective in nature, right? It's going to be adrenaline filled, a reaction to an emotional setting, a frustration. I would say when you look at these, all of these things, I would imagine some you've experienced at one point or another. When you're dealing with your personal monster, a late student, someone who's unprepared, who's testing boundaries, who's yelling at you, we've felt many of these things. Frustrated with them, annoyed at the admissions department. What are they thinking? Letting this student in, right? We get scared. Like that professor, we don't know what to do. We just go back to teaching. So one of the first tips I'd give you related to crisis de-escalation or how to manage a crisis or work with a student who's pushing our buttons is always going to be an awareness of how we're feeling and what's going on inside of us. Because if we don't do that, we're going to be reactive instead of thoughtful and preventative. What I want you to do is be at a place where you can carefully draw into your toolkit and decide which intervention for this student at this time is going to be the most effective. If you're like me and you're pissed off, it's like driving the minivan with the kids in the back and they're fighting. You're like, you will never watch TV again, right? That's not an effective intervention. Like, I'm a psychology person. I can assure you that's not a good intervention. It's too much and too broad and overly painful. Yeah. So I'm better when I say what? Like, I don't have a punishment for you right now, but when we get to the driveway, you're going to go in the house and your mom and I are going to sit in the car. And we're going to talk about what's going to happen based on your behavior. Did y'all shiver a little bit? Right? That's what we want. We want to be thoughtful and delayed in our reaction, not just reactive to what's there. So it starts with knowing what our feelings are. And just, there's not a whole lot you do. You just kind of own it. You're like, this is how I'm feeling right now. I'm really pissed off. Just the awareness of that, I find helpful. The second step is really developing what I like to call a sense of equanimity, balance in the face of chaos. And when you think about your good professors, think about the professors in your life that had a positive impact on you, right? And let's just take like John Houseman out of the picture. I know some of you have that like one professor who was like from Paper Chase, like yelling at you all the time. And for whatever weird reason, you're like, I just love them the most because they yelled at me the most. That's a different problem. We'll talk about that later. But really, talk about the one that encouraged you, that was supportive, right? That's typically their stance. They were calm. They didn't react to the situation at hand. They were reflective. They seemed to be genuine, nurturing, and caring. They had Zen dog qualities, right? They were like this peaceful little mutt. So one of the ways to achieve this is the idea of cycle breathing. And this is not psycho breathing, it's cycle breathing. Psycho breathing does not work. It's like, don't be like, that is not calming to the students at all. You don't want to do that. But this other kind of breathing is one way to regain some control for us. And there's a pretty straightforward process. And I know you're in California, so you've all probably are out there doing like yoga and meditative breathing and eating alfalfa all the time. That's my surfing. That's my vibe on all y'all. So as you're doing those things, cycle breathing is just an easy way to understand this idea of breathing in, holding your breath, breathing out, and repeating. What I used to do with this, I used to actually teach this to my classes before I would give a test. So I would use this in like psych classes before I would hand out the test. I just walked them through this like 4 or 5 cycles. And what it did is it calmed people down a bit, focused them on the task at hand. So this is really great in a preparatory state as you're about to deal with that person. Sometimes we have a heads up, right? We get a parent call that's blinking on the phone. We know we're going to be at a faculty meeting soon. We are having a fight with our spouse. We know we're headed into a danger zone. So we can practice this as we go into it. Otherwise, you know, you can do this while you're talking to someone. I just advise maybe don't be like 1, 2, 3. That's going to annoy the person. But the idea of just kind of catching your breath. I've been at many a faculty meeting, and I'm that guy who's just like, oh, I'm the one who like takes off his glasses and like, oh, here we go. Like, so I know for me, I hit that point, I just kind of go off a bit and have a conversation. So if I'm trying to avoid that for whatever reason on a particular topic, I find myself doing this kind of breathing exercise. It's very helpful and useful. It lowers your blood pressure. It deals with some of the adrenaline dump that's in your body and does a really nice job letting you be calm, cool, and collected when you're dealing with the crisis in front of you. Because if you're coming into the crisis and you're out of control, you're not going to be as effective in managing that crisis. That's crisis de-escalation 101. It's why you never see like EMTs running anywhere. We don't like running. And part of it is because if we're running to a scene, what happens when we show up and someone's bleeding out on the scene? What do we need to do? Well, find motor control things. So if we're running and all the blood's kind of flowing to our trunk and we're able to kind of jump in, we're going to need some time to kind of adjust. So showing up to a scene out of breath or in like an adrenaline dump state, we want to be trying to be calm, cool, and collected so we're not reactive to the situation. So we want to be like this dog who's got it down pretty chill. This is the last thing I'll share with you in terms of like preparation for entering crisis mode. So we covered a couple things, right? We want to be aware of our feelings, maybe do something to kind of take our level down a little bit. And the next thing, the final thing I'll talk about in terms of preparation is being in a place of trying to empathize with where the student's coming from. And this one's the harder one, right? So we want to get to a place where we can try to wrestle with the idea that probably not doing this just to piss us off, but there's someone in pain. You've all heard the old saying, hurt people, hurt people. Here we're dealing with someone in a panicked state, behaving badly. So if we can wrap our head around that a little bit, we're often in a better position to manage that crisis. Now, if this is a repetitive thing with this student, if they're just doing this to be a jerk, then we're in a bit of a different problem. That's where conduct can come in and setting those limits over time. But even there, we're better off when we set those conduct limits in a calm, cool, and collected place. So I have this video on empathy, which is one of my favorites. Maybe you've seen it before. It's Teresa Wiseman's work, but it highlights the importance of an empathetic reaction, what empathy means.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy is very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. we're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Good stuff, right? Good stuff. So what doesn't work when we're trying to manage classroom scenarios is HR here? Is that we're good? Okay, they frown upon this, so I just wanted to highlight it. You can't spray the students with water bottles. I don't think this works with cats either, but that's one of the problems. So we also can't thank them. That's frowned upon. I think there's some concerns about that. We can't taste them. Oh, no, it's on the syllabus. Just doing this, really, I get we put it on the syllabus. The problem is the students don't always read the syllabus, right? So classroom management for you, and I know I'm going to talk to a couple of you here, can't just be writing a couple paragraphs about your expectations for your classroom and being like, enough said, like a casino dealer, you're like walking away from the table, like told them what they needed to know. That's not a good plan. You have to go over this, have to get some buy-in from them. I mean, and when I say you have to, if you want it to work, you have to. If you don't want your classroom to be like a police state where you have to catch them doing wrong things all the time, there has to be like a buy-in to the community standards. I've watched some instructors actually take some time and like ask the students what, especially in like debate classes or ones that have like higher ethics debates and things like that, like actually having them be part of the rules. Well, what are the expectations for the class? You want to be careful of this though, and not go, the students sometimes, if you've tried this, you know this, they go all Lord of the Flies on you. They're like, what the rules are going to be is if someone takes out their phone, we smash it. They're like, maybe not. Like, maybe let's just back that up a little bit and like, they bring the stockade out. You're like, no, we're not going to do that. But so they actually are a lot harsher than sometimes we are. It's surprising if you tried this. But having some buy-in from the students can be really critical. Also, I was saying earlier, we can't tase them. This was decided against the legal case in Florida, don't tase me versus bro. So no tasing of the student. So what do we do? Well, what I want to hit you here with is about 5 different approaches to working with difficult situations. So my hope is at least one of these will resonate with you. If all 5 do, awesome. But I want to just kind of lay some knowledge on you here. Ellis's work in rational emotive behavioral therapy. Where are my psychology people? Where are y'all at? Awesome. You're well spread out. I like it. You're just very like egalitarian, supporting the room. I like that. So this will feel like all the math people are huddled, like they're in a silo, like protecting the. So a lot of these concepts are ones that you've heard before, but I think it bears repeating because what Ellis argued for is we have activating events. This is essentially bad shit that happens that we have no control over. So some behavior occurs. I often use the example, I spill coffee on my shirt first thing in the morning. That's a pretty regular occurrence. So that's the A, that's the activating event. The B is my belief about that. So if I'm like, oh no, I spilled coffee on my shirt, this is my only shirt, this is the shirt I was gonna wear today, I don't know what to do. And then I'm in this downward spiral, right? My belief feeds into my consequence. So I'm all curled up in the bathtub crying, and I'm like, I can't go to the college today and teach because they're gonna see the stain on my shirt. So this process of a bad thing that happens, A, leading to our belief about it, either rational or irrational, leads to a positive or negative consequence. Someone cuts us off in traffic. I know that's a bit of a stretch here. That doesn't happen a lot in California. But if you could imagine someone, yeah, if that occurs, you know, we have our choice then about the belief. We can say maybe their wife's sick and they're rushing off to the hospital. In either case, we're not going to know. So why not pick a more positive frame to believe that lets you kind of take it off your shoulders? So part of our problem is we end up kind of building ourselves up, often through irrational thought processes, to getting pissed. How dare they cut me off? Don't they know who I am? Like, and then we get angry and frustrated, and then suddenly we're following them to their driveway. We're in a fist fight. It gets escalated, right? So that's the concern here. So one of the things that we can teach both our students and ourselves is we don't have control over the bad things that happen. We have controls over our beliefs related to them and what happens next. So it's a simple concept, but it's a really powerful one. It's one of those like Zen koans to kind of reflect upon. And I think, one way to practice this is over the next week or so, especially as classes are starting, just be thoughtful about activating events. Even if you just start with, hey, that Brian guy said this. This is one of those activating events. Something bad just happened. What's my belief about this? How does that feed me to a positive or a negative consequence? Make sense? That's like your screwdriver in your toolkit. Crisis management and really all of this de-escalation work is both a subtle science and an exact art. That term might be familiar to some of you, and I want to show you a clip that highlights this. I do think at the heart of this, professors like this who are good at this because they tune into the art of it. They're just decent people and they're good with this. It's like they have Jedi mind tricks. They're like, this isn't the grade you were upset about. They're like, this isn't the grade I'm upset about. Like, I don't know. How did that work? I don't know. But there's an art to it. But there's also a science, like that first video we watched, the clenching of fists, the moving into someone's personal space, saying, you're going to give me the grade that I want. In that scenario, you need to have part of your brain that clicks over and is like, you know what? This is one of those things Brian was talking about. This is an escalation to physical violence. So I need to change my tactic. Because what I don't want to do there is pick up, if I could borrow this just for a moment. I don't want to pick up my syllabus and say, yeah, it says right here on the syllabus, if you miss more than one of my classes, I reserve the right to drop you 1/2 letter grade. You're going to be right, but you're also going to be punched in the head. And that's not where we want you to be. That's not a good place to be. So if you recognize this phrase, it's from Harry Potter, good old Professor Snape.
There will be no foolish wand-waving or silly incantations in this class. As such, I don't expect many of you to appreciate the subtle science and exact art that is potion making. However, for those select few who possess the predisposition, I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death.
So one of the best investments we can make in higher ed is in capes. I feel like if we could bring capes back, that would be awesome, right? Like the idea of that would, so I think even beyond this training, if we all can get some capes going, that would be good. Building a connection with students. When you think about the last time you had a conflict with someone, this is the nice part of this. This can be a student, an advisor, a supervisor, your wife, your husband, your kid. It doesn't matter. Like think about the last conflict you were in, right? Where you're arguing with somebody. Everyone got something in their head. In that conflict, think about the bridge between you and them. What did it look like? It was the bridge of connection, something like this. When you're trying to persuade them to change, was it like this, right? Which is not a particularly safe looking bridge. Can we all agree to that? Yes. Particularly unsafe in Louisiana because of the alligator situation. Like, not good, right? Or did it look like this, right? Is it strong and dependable? So the real question here is when we're dealing with students or anyone we're in conflict with and we're trying to persuade them, right? Back to hear what we were saying. We're trying to persuade them to behave differently. Isn't that a fun way to think about this? It's an interesting take on classroom management. I'm trying to persuade them to behave differently. So it's really at the core of what we're doing, trying to help them understand what they're currently doing is not working, so I want you to do something different. How do we make the bridge that looks like this to this? So how do we take this bridge and improve it? Let me ask you, what are some of the things that you do, either in your office space, in your conversations with students? How do you engage them to build a better bridge? What are our commonalities that we try to stress? Anyone have experience with that? What do you do to try to form a connection with your students? Whether it's a story that you tell, pictures that you show, a stance that you have, an opening conversation you have with a class, what do you do? Please. Love it. Yeah, nothing's better than when you're at the same school that the students went to, because then they're actually able to make a very direct, easy parallel to that growth. That I could follow this path myself. And you often, I find, and I don't know if this plays with your experience, but for me, I find they learn most from our weakest moments rather than our greatest achievement. So when we share with them like a bad grade we got on a test, or sometimes it's the same professor. I had that professor too. They didn't like me either. That those kind of sharings like make them feel a little more connected to us rather than our greatest findings and achievements. Yeah. Do you have one as well? Yeah, names are super powerful. It's odd as a therapist, you think I'd be better at this. I suck at this. Like I do that thing all the time where someone says their name and I'm like, yeah, like not even 2 seconds later, it's out of my head. Like it just didn't stick. So making sure that you're dedicated. There's a lot of mnemonics, ways that you can do this, associating things with people. So it's a very powerful technique where people like their own name. And to be able to, when I talk to students, one of the things I tell them is every time you talk to your professor, say, hi, I'm Brian. Even if they say, oh, yeah, I know who you are, still say it, until you're 100% sure. Because that's the normal social reaction of someone. Like you have no idea who they are, right? And you're with your wife, and you're like, hey, ask them, introduce yourself first. And I'm going to like I'm not paying attention. Right? You're at the party. Like, oh, hi, I'm Bethany. And she's like, and I'm like, oh, I'm over here somewhere. You're like, oh, I'm Dave. And you're like, yeah, oh, Dave, hey. Like, and then so that's the problem, right? So sometimes someone just saying, I know the name, not always the case. So be repetitive until someone gets that down. That's what I tell the students. Same for us. We'll go here and then there. Yeah. Love it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, pets are a great way to kind of do that. I used to, you saw in the beginning of the slideshow, I put up some pictures of like where I've traveled to. I'll do that a lot with students just so they can see a little bit more about who I am, where I've been. In my threat trainings, I have all 6 cats and 2 dogs worked into the training. Sometimes you can put them on tests. What would Fluffy say about this? Like, and it's fun because they see you not just as a professor, not just as an instructor, but as a person, which is kind of that good boundary part, right? I think over here and then there. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I love that. So the ability to bring back some of their natural language about something they just said, do kind of a bridge back. Probably, maybe you know this and maybe you don't, in the narrative therapy world, the attending to metaphor and the actual language that a student might use in a therapeutic approach is hugely impactful. I got to do a recent hostage negotiation course for about a week, and it was fascinating stuff, kind of seeing the law enforcement application of psychology. They talk about hooks and barbs, things that push away our student connections. And here it's like, negotiating with someone who's barricaded with hostages. But it plays surprisingly well with classroom management. What are the hooks that get the student closer to us? And what are the barbs that push them away? And one of the things they teach us to do is these are called personal kind of statements that they make, third-party statements, so that we'll record them and then be able to play them through a loudspeaker. So you'll hear from a person that the person's connected to. But using very specific language, like if you're calling like your spouse like darling or honey or something, like using that kind of language can be very powerful. And it plays in a classroom because when a student shares a story and you attend back to what they just said or even use their language, they feel like you're listening and they feel like you're connected. It's a very powerful way to build. So I like that one a lot. Very good stuff. Yeah, please. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of personal connection, spending some time, first day of meeting them, shaking your hand, getting to know them, even doing that round circle, like, why did you take this course? What are you interested in? Do one more and I'll move forward. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. We have some authority sometimes that the student, we might forget that ourselves, but the messaging that we're sending to the students, they often hear that from the college, from our authority. Things that we can do to soften that a bit, whether it's how we speak with our hands, getting closer, or getting to their level can be really useful. Something as simple as just sitting at your desk over them. Sometimes I'm on this a lot, like on a podium. Someone comes up to ask a question. I'm like the great and powerful Oz, like talking down to them, like so I get away from the podium and I come down to their level. It's really useful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think so. I mean, it touches on this idea of moving away from objectification, right? So this idea of mutual respect. I respect you, you respect me. I also heard from you a little bit that, like, I might even start, like, I'm going to start with respecting you, however you're going to treat me. The hope is that that'll come back in tandem. And for people who've gone through bad experiences with other professors who are mean to them, childhood growth issues, in development, maybe dealing with some mental health issues, dealing with some trauma, coming back from military service, balancing all their life, work, family. So it's not always about us that they're giving disrespect to. It's about just the frustration. That when people are calm, cool, and collected and are in a balanced state, they often behave very well. We behave badly when we start to get stressed and get overwhelmed. We're not at our A game anymore. We've all had this experience. So if we can communicate to them that I don't expect you to be perfect all the time, but respectful. If you're having a hard time, share that. As a therapist, when I would work with clients, sometimes I was out late, like on a call or drinking, and I'd come in the next morning. It's an easier story when I'm out late on a call. But as I'm meeting with a student, if I'm tired and I look tired, one of the worst things we can do is when a student, especially in a therapeutic setting, says, "Looks like you're tired," is to deny that. Because what you're doing is you're messing with their already fragile sense of perception of things around them. Like, "No, you're wrong. I'm fine. I don't know why you think that." To say more like, "Yeah, I was out late last night helping someone. I am a little tired this morning, but 100% focused on you. It just might seem like I'm a little slow getting the coffee going." That's a better way, because it teaches back to what we were saying before, not being perfect and not excelling in everything, but being human and being willing to be vulnerable. And when we're vulnerable with them, sometimes that's good that they can be vulnerable back with us. Great stuff. So building these connections, money in the bank. We want to change the bridge. Another concept here is the idea of meta communication. You've probably heard of this before as well. It's similar to this. When a student comes in and they're yelling and they're pissed, "Change this grade, this is bullshit. I studied for this test. You said chapter 3 wasn't going to be on it. And this was all chapter 3. So you're a liar," right? So you can respond in kind, "Get out of my face, you're a liar," blah, blah, and the police come in, right? Or we can try to manage the situation. And the idea of meta communication is dealing with content and process. The content of what they're saying, like up top, that piece, right? What they're shouting at us is anger and frustration. What's going on underneath? What's driving that? What's that process piece? For every student who's like, "This is bullshit, and you suck, and why are you even teaching? This whole place is crap." What's the real emotion that they have underneath all that? I think it's fear as well. I think it's fear. I think they're worried that their parents are going to be on them about their grades. They're not going to succeed. They're not going to achieve what they wanted to achieve. It's all coming out as anger, but the underneath is fear. So some of you are like, "Man, I sure wish Brian could teach me a Jedi mind trick. That would be pretty sweet." This is as close as I get. If when someone's angry at you and they're yelling at you, you take a moment and you respond to the underneath fear about what they're expressing. So a student is upset, you're like launching into, and you say to them really quietly, like, "Sounds like you're really worried that you're not going to get the grade you want in this class. So maybe you and I can work together to try to figure out a way to make that happen." And the nice thing about this is it also takes the wind out of their sails, because what's the student expecting when you're yelling at them? You yell back, right? So you're pulling a little bit of a kung fu move on them. When you take their energy, you kind of flip it. Instead of them getting back this anger, you're taking the wind out of their sails. So it's a powerful technique to use as well. So attending to those meta communications underneath to what's going on. It's almost like I used to do whitewater rafting. I was a guide for a while. I have a weird life. And as I was doing that, the stuff on top is the rapids. It's the swirling eddies. It's the rocks. It's the kayakers in the way of your boat. That's the stuff that we draw our attention to. But if you've ever been on a rafting trip, what do they warn you about? Right? It's the stuff underneath. It's this stuff, right? The foot entrapments, the fact that your foot gets caught and the river flows over your head, pushing your head down. Everyone's like, "I'm going to go rafting this weekend. That sounds great." That's the stuff that we attend to. So paying attention to the underneath can be a very powerful way. And don't take my word for this. This one, put it on a note, put it on a sticky note on your window and say, "Today, when someone's upset or pissed at me, I'm going to try this technique." And what you'll find is it works, because you're getting basically what they want. When someone's yelling, at the heart of what they're yelling typically is about them feeling not understood or scared. So when you reassure them that you're listening, they don't need to yell anymore. It's a very powerful kind of technique to use. I wanted to talk a little bit about motivational interviewing here. There's 5 techniques in this, and there's a great write-up on this in your supplemental guide. So you can certainly look at those. But the expressing of empathy, we already covered that a little bit. It starts with the idea of kind of getting in the hole with them. So motivational interviewing is a technique developed by Miller and Rolnick to work with college students who had serious drinking problems who weren't being compliant with their treatment, and they didn't want to change. And some of you might say, well, that's a tough population. It sounds like some of our students sometimes. How do you work with a student who puts up these bars or barriers to us? So one of the ways to do this is to attend to this idea of looking at the student and trying to understand where they're coming from, getting in that hole with them. And it's not enough to be empathetic, you have to express this empathy to them. The second here is developing discrepancy. We've all met this student before who's doing the wrong thing over and over and over again, expecting a different outcome, like a dog chasing its tail. So one of the things that we can do with the student is help them understand that what they're currently doing isn't going to get them where they want to be. But what they really want to look at is trying something new that's a little more solution focused. The avoiding argumentation here, I'll take this image. When I first found it, it was people arguing. That's what I found it when I looked it up. Over the years, it keeps looking to me like someone's singing, like rocking out some like Journey, right? Like just a small town girl, right? Just right in my, I can't unsee that now. But when we're arguing with someone, here's the thing, they're not listening to us, they're not listening to our response. And that's gonna be a problem. So we're in an active, passionate argument with someone, realize that they're not listening to us anymore. What are they doing? They're pretty much just waiting to tell us that we're an idiot and make their points. So when we're finding ourselves in this argument, this back and forth, one of the things I suggest is stop and try some of these counseling techniques. Try to feed towards them some information about the situation that they're in. So if they're arguing with you about a grade, kind of pausing, and instead of fighting back, like that's not true, I told you chapter 3 was on it, telling them instead, like, help me understand where you feel like you got lost in this, or help me feel like what the expectations were. Help me understand more. So you're asking open-ended questions to explore things more than fighting with them about the content of what's there. I'll tell a quick story. I know we're kind of running out of time, and if you do have to go, it's fine. I'll have another 5 minutes if that's all right. When I think about this, I think about being at Delta at the Atlanta airport. There's this older guy there, and he was like having this, I don't know, war with modernity over that little computer that like prints your ticket. And I was rushed like everyone else, just kind of watching this. There's a big line of people waiting. And the guy was like putting his ticket information. He's like, beep, 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 beep. Like, nothing was working. It wasn't happening. He did it again. He was getting frustrated. So the Delta representative who was over here wandered over to help him. Said, sir, can I help you? He's like, yeah, I'm entering my stuff. This isn't working. I'm putting it in. It's on. Nothing's working. I don't know what's going on. He says, I'd be glad to help you. Just let me see your ticket. He's like, I already did it right. I filled out what it says. I put this here, put it in. I typed it in. It's the computer. The computer's broken. He's getting more and more upset, right? I'm over here just watching this. Now I'm taking some notes. I'm like, oh, it's going to be good for my lecture at some point. I'm going to hold on to that one. So this is going on. So they go back and forth, and eventually it's like, fine, you just do it. She takes it, and she's like, yeah, bing, everything's fine, right? And the guy gets mad, and he kind of runs off in the house. Thanks, whatever, thank you. Stupid computer, stupid Delta. So she solved his problem, but it really didn't fix the issue, right? So the issue was his frustration. So often we have the answer. I'll talk to the staff a lot more. It's a very staff-oriented one. A little bit of the faculty too, but very much for the staff. We have the answer. If they would shut up and listen to us. If we somehow could open their head and put in an answer and have them follow that script, they would be happier and more successful, and everything would be like sunshine and unicorns for them. So let me just honor everyone in here. If they actually listen to you, they would be better. I agree. The problem is it's not how human nature works, right? So people say, Brian, what would you do in that scenario differently? Well, what I'd say is in that scenario, if the woman who helped him said, listen, sir, I fixed this for you, but I get it. It's very confusing because you were entering your confirmation number, not the flight number. It's so hard to do. And having been a frequent flyer, like I still am frustrated with like these airlines that are like, well, you purchased an E-ticket, not an A-ticket. I'm like, I don't work for you. I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know. Do you have like 296.3, like major depression, severe recurrent? Oh, you don't know what that code means? It's funny, right? Isn't it that I don't do this, but this is my head, right? All the time. It's funny, like when I talk in my language, you don't understand. I'm like one step away from like a Larry David sitcom, I swear to God, most of the time. So that's playing out. So I think what would have happened if she said, yeah, these computers can be tricky. I'll take a note for this, bring it back to Delta. She's not gonna. But even if she says that, like that gives them the impression it's not him, but it's the computer. And there certainly could be an easier way to do this check-in. So it's that piece that you can be right, but if you're not attending to the conflict, that's gonna be where you run into trouble. The last two here, don't do a keto on your students, but instead, this rolling with resistance, moving with them. So when someone charges at you, you have a choice to charge back or to step aside. You know, a student comes in a conflict, rah, 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 rah. I'm like, whoop, they bang into the podium and fall down. You're like, can I help you now? Like, that's a better place to be rather than kind of getting into it with them. With this example, I often say, imagine you had a mouse trap. You need to get me a mouse trap with a big piece of cheese on it. And the student's holding this out to you. And essentially what they're doing every time they're in conflict with you is they're saying, would you like this piece of stinky cheese? And you know, you have the choice, right, back to the ABCs. You can take it and engage with them in this, or you can say, I don't want your cheese. I also find it particularly helpful to just mumble that under your breath. When you're dealing with them, they're yelling at you, and you're like, I don't want your cheese. They're like, what are you talking about? Aren't you listening to me? They get disoriented. So we can avoid those MI traps by not getting kind of caught up into some of their arguments, but instead listening and trying some different things. These are all written in a lot more detail in the companion pack. So again, I'd encourage you to look at that if you have questions about applications of it, for sure. The final one here is this gold star moment, catching them being good. This works particularly well if you have a student who's engaged in bad behavior or difficult behavior over and over and over again. The one time they show up to class on time, prepared with a pencil, ready for a test, catch them and thank them for that. Say, good job. You know, I know sometimes it's hard to get here on time, and it seems like you went out of your way to do that today. Thank you. You're not thanking them, you know, I think people get hung up on this sometimes too. You're not thanking them because you have to. You're thanking them because it's basically some operant conditioning to better behavior. You're thanking them to get them to do that again, right? It's kind of giving the rat the M&M. Probably don't make these examples to the student. But when they do something good and you catch them doing that, we're shaping better behavior by doing this. So I want to do that with them as well. So I'll end with this comment. I'm not in a rush. My next one's not until noon. And I will try to teach different concepts in each of these. But I want to end with this perspective piece. Although I did promise you this, let me, if I can grab just a minute here. I can share more with you about this, but when we do a threat assessment, I was talking about what things to look at. These are those 35 items that we look at when we're looking at threat. So whether it's coming back or sharing with you some of our webinars or different topics, when we look at threat, one of the things that we're going to pay attention to is the full range of the threat that we have. So here is a direct threat. That's one of the factors that we look at. I'm going to kill you. Do they have access to weapons and knives, the bomb-making materials? Are they fantasizing about carrying out the threat? Is there a time and place the threat's going to occur? Is there a fixation and focus narrowing down on an individual? This idea of injustice collecting, holding on to a past wrong and seeing that as deterministic to the future. So we have all of these. The ones in blue, just as a quick side note, these here are mental health factors. So when I'm looking at targeted violence with like a school shooting or something similar, what I'm looking at, we hear a lot from the news, it's mental health. About 7 of these out of 35 are mental health related. 2 are related to weapons. So when we do threat assessments at the college level, we look at mental health and weapons, both as aggravating factors, but that's about 25% of the factors that we look at. There's another 75% of factors that we look at for targeted violence. So it's one of the things that we train your teams on to attend to, not just a mental health assessment, but instead really looking at some of these targeted factors for violence. So I'll give you a site too. We'll put it up in the video that you can go to. But for right now, it's NABITA, NABITA.org, and then /tools. And that'll actually take you to our tools website. So NABITA, NABITA.org /tools. If you want to read more about some of our factors and the different tools that we have to assess risk, we have one on written threats that's particularly interesting. So there's probably an easier way to do this. And you're not missing out on this. I have all 3 sessions in here, so they just ta-da. So I'll end real quick on this. I read somewhere in professional presenting guides that it's really a good idea to end with a joke, so I'll do that for you. But also a deep point. So also, I love this quote. It's one of those ones that's a little bit lectury, but also kind of reminds me that we're only as good as our weakest moment. that we want to really try to strive to be on top of things. When we're dealing with students, and this is my conclusion here, we want to pay attention to the challenges that they're having. And I started off with this, that if we're going to manage someone who's difficult around us, we want to focus on the importance here of understanding their motivation and the context about why they're upset. If we jump to an intervention before we understand where they're coming from, we're going to miss something. So we look at this picture, right? And what do you see? It's a frog. Yeah? You see this frog face. Here's this frog's butt. And he's sitting on a reflection on a bog, right? But some of you, looking at the exact same problem, the exact same conflict, the exact same incident, like from the faculty perspective versus the student, you all see a horse. Here's the eye, here's the ears, and now this is the nose. Look at it sideways. I know like 5 of you are struggling with this. I'll hang after class and I'll trace it out for you, so we'll get you where you need to be. That's what we're looking at here. So I found these commercials, which I find hilarious, and it really drives home this point for you, that one of the best things about crisis de-escalation is pausing for a moment and understand that they're not doing this simply to piss you off. They're doing this because of their perspective. They're seeing the conflict different than you're seeing the conflict.
Hello? Well, how much are they asking?
Well, that's a lot of money for a deck.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but you're getting robbed. Did you hear me? You're getting robbed.
Stop!
Ameriquest, an open-minded, equal opportunity lender.
Funny, right? But we can relate to the scenario where we're like, it's just a B-, man. You're going to be fine. Like, you just didn't get an A like you've gotten your whole life. You're going to be okay. But for them, it's DEFCON 5, right? Or 1, whatever the worst one is. I don't know. Like, they're not good. They're like falling apart. And you're like, but it's going to be all right. She left me. I'm never going to find anyone again. This is it. This is my one shot at a relationship. You're like, no, you're going to be all right. Like, so helping them build what we call cognitive, to avoid catastrophization, building some awareness that maybe some delayed worry with things. So helping them understand that the way they're seeing the situation, like this panic, overwhelm, my life's on fire, for you is like person 13 out of 35, you're going to have the exact same conversation with this week. So helping understand the perspective shift there being really critical. I got one more for you.
Patient has a fractured fibula, given him mild sedative, so he can be able to go on tomorrow.
Gabby's gonna be so excited.
That killed him.
Paging Dr. Palmer, Dr. Barbara Palmer, dial 452.
I love that one too, right? And that's always a bit of a test. That lands differently across the country. I'm glad you all liked it. Sometimes they're like, what? I'm like, she's okay. They're actors. No one died. It's when she lets go of the balloon, though, that gets right in the heart. But we all can relate to a time, right? And especially go find your senior professors in the room, right, and ask them for their story. Because all of us have a story where we got ahead of steam. You know this is coming. So I've been doing this for like 25 years. So we all have a story where we had a head of steam on a student's behavior. And we're like, this is ridiculous. We get in rant mode. We're like, this is ridiculous. I told you what this was. You're late again. What do you think? We just go off, right, on the student. We've all done this. If you haven't, you're gonna. And you go off on this rant. And then the student, here's the fun part. They say something that makes you feel like a complete shit. Because they're like, yeah, my mom died. I'm just coming from a funeral. You're like, oh, God damn it. Like, right? So understanding first, this is a Stephen Covey thing too, understanding before being understood, like trying to get where they're coming from is such a useful technique, and it takes a little more time. My hope is all 30 students in your class don't need this level of crisis de-escalation, but maybe that 1 or 2 that you can invest a little bit more time in is going to kind of give those dividends at the end. Yeah. This last one's just for me because I really like it, so it shows my darker sense of humor.
Hey, dude. You got to sit down. Come on.
Ameriquest Mortgage, proud sponsor of.
good, right? That's a good one, for sure. So I know we were going to try to leave some times for questions, but we just had there's so much stuff I wanted to share with you. I didn't do that as well as I could have. I'm not rushing off anywhere. I have a little bit of time before the 12 o'clock. So if you do have some questions and you want to ask them, very much encourage you to do that. I'm also going to pop my email back up on the screen here for you so you can send me an email. I have a couple cards if people don't like writing things down. I can give you a card as well. I really would encourage you, and I mean this from my heart, if you have a question about a scenario that you're stuck on, we have all these books and resources and great things, but just send me an email and I'm really happy to kind of give you an answer. And I'll give you a little reading on a particular topic, whether it's pulling a chapter from one of my books or just giving you some info that might be useful. So if it's you or a colleague, I don't want this to be like the first and only connection to your school that we've ever had. I'd much rather be connected to you as we move forward. So if you got stuck on something, didn't get a chance to ask a question, hang around for a bit. You can ask me. Otherwise, send me an email and be happy to respond to you with some good resources. Cool. Thanks for your attention and your time. Appreciate it. Thanks.